Today on Co-op for Two, a detailed look at this ultra-rare and out-of-print game from 1984, Mugbook. Where does this detective narrative mystery game fit into the history of this genre, and what secrets does it have in store? Stay tuned to find out. So today we're doing something quite unusual. We're taking a look at Mugbook, which is an ultra-rare game from 1984. You can find a listing for it on Board Game Geek. But this copy was purchased on eBay for $45, and I've been looking for it for a couple years now. It's a game clearly inspired by Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, but with some differences and some twists, and maybe we'll see why it didn't quite catch on the way Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective did. But there's lots of interesting things going on here. And let's start by placing it in the historical context of these games. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective came out in 1981, 1982, published by Sleuth Publications, a couple of people in San Francisco. Gary Grady, Suzanne Goldberg, and one more. And it's still being published to this day with expansions. Now, that company that made Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective actually published a detective spin-off game called Gumshoe, a notorious, amazing, epic game that I've played on the channel, a box of 10 or more cases spanning a long period of time. But Gumshoe came out in 1986. This game here, Mugbook, came out 1984. So between Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and Gumshoe came this game, which really bears some real resemblance to Gumshoe. So it's very possible that Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective inspired Mugbook and Mugbook inspired Gumshoe. What we're going to do today is we're going to open this up, do like a little unboxing. We're going to look at everything. I'm going to talk about the game mechanics, but we're going to look through all of this. Would you consider there be spoilers here? A tiny bit. It's going to be very unlikely that you'll ever get your hands on this. If you're a big fan of this genre, you might. There are 30 cases in this game. We're going to just look at a little bit of one. So really, I think, unless you're crazy about spoilers, I wouldn't worry about it. So this probably looks like it was the original packaging for this game. It's got a sticker for Mugbook. It was sold for $26 in 1988. And let's look at what we've got here. So actually, I'm going to do it in a slightly different order. So here was the little blurb that would have been on the back of the box. Let's just take a look. Here's a game that challenges you. You're a cop on the force in the big city. Here you encounter murder, burglary, robbery, and more. It's up to you to solve these crimes, but they are more than just mysteries to solve. You're on the streets battling crime. There are no dice to roll or cards to draw from. The only luck involved is the kind you gain from experience. After sifting through the initial police report, you must decide how to conduct your investigation. Crime lab, ballistic, and coroner reports are provided to aid you in your work, but be forewarned that situations can change quickly in this game. Included is the rule book, the Mugbook of Criminals, a large map of the city, city directory, time sequence chart, crime scenario book number 1, with 30 tough crimes to solve. Okay, published by Power Play Games in Denver, Colorado, long out of existence. This was basically a one-person design. Keith Olson is the name of the author. He's deceased now. So you saw it said here, Crime Scenario Book 1. All right, so my copy did not come with this sheet that would have been in the original. This is someone else's scan from Mugbook. They were individually serial numbers. And you could see, you could order a shirt, but you could also order 2 additional scenario books. Now, no one has ever seen these scenario books, so we don't know if they exist or this was just wishful thinking. This wouldn't have been unusual for this kind of game that was self-published to sort of try to sell games that didn't exist yet. So it wouldn't be surprising. In fact, it says here, scenario books available fall 1984. So I wouldn't be surprised if these never got made because this game never caught on. But if you know differently, if you've seen them, or you are part of Keith Olson's estate and he's got drafts of them, please let us know. Never seen this t-shirt in the wild either. All right, here are the instructions. Let's look at the materials first before we go through the instructions. So there's a rule book, a 5-page rule book. We'll take a closer look at that in a second. Here's a time chart where you would keep track of how much time has passed. Very classic, old school, homemade game with a little marker. Tells you in the instructions you could use a coin. And here you would keep track of time. Then there's a directory. I'll explain how this directory works in a second, but let's take a look at this map first. So here's a map of the city. Metro City map. So you can see, similar to Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective style game, it's a map with numbered locations. Parks are listed, train stations, hospitals, synagogues, churches, fire department, water department, police stations. So a nice, big, generous map of the city. There's a baseball stadium, horse racing, city hall, airport, dairy farm, the Beta Institute for Nuclear Science. Okay, so there's your map. Then there's a directory with residential entries and yellow pages. We'll take a closer look at that in a second. And then there's 2 more books. There's a mug book of criminals and a scenario book. This is where the heart of the game is. If you know what Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is, which you should learn about before you watch this video, because it won't make much sense if you don't. So all of the entries and text are in this book. We're going to take a look at that last, because that's the most interesting part. But we're going to take a look at the mug book, the directory, and that book as we proceed. But let's take a closer look at the rules and see how this game plays and how it's different from Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, etc. Okay, so already you know there's 30 cases in here compared to maybe 10 cases in a big Sherlock Holmes book. So there's a lot more cases here. And the type is very small, but there's a different emphasis here, which is why there's so many cases packed into this. But let's keep going. Okay, so first entry here is telling you about the directory, which is different than Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective structure. It's broken up into residential and business. In the residential entries, it's alphabetical, but notice what we've got here. We've got people's names and then a number next to them, most of them. Some of them have just an asterisk and some of them have an R. Now, when they've got a number, it's telling you what business the people work at. So you don't visit people at their home, really. You visit them at their place of business. So if we look at Chadwick Cyril works at building 431 or business 431. Then if you look at the yellow pages, you will see that we've got accountants, attorneys, etc. So they're listed alphabetically by type, but each company, each business has a number which is in order through the yellow pages. So first are all the accountants which are start at number 10, 11, and so on. And then comes the air conditioning services, which is number 14, advertising 12, 13. In other words, so all the business numbers go up sequentially. So if we found someone here, let's see, Linda Zachary works at 90. So then if we looked up number 90 here, which would be sequential, right? So we just go to businesses till we get to number 90, which looks like it's on this page. 81, 92. Looks like I'm missing, no? 92, 93. Looks like we don't have a number 90. Oh, maybe that's 80s. Oh, yeah. Okay, so here's 90. Need my glasses for this small print. So 90 is the Golden Horseshoe Bar. So that's where she works. And in the yellow pages, we've got the name of the business, Golden Horseshoe Bar, number 90. And then we are also told where it is located on the map. Here is at L18. So if we break out our map, we can look for business 90 at L18. Okay, so here's L, and here's 18, and there's the Golden Horseshoe Bar, number 90. Okay, so that's how you go from a person to their business to their location on the map. Okay. But unlike Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you wouldn't look them up by their address. In Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, you would find someone's address, either their residential or business address, and then you'd look up their address in the book for that case. Things work differently here, but we'll get to that in a second. But now you know how the residential and how the yellow pages work. And you could look up, if you just wanted to visit a location, you wouldn't have to start with the people. You just find out, okay, we've got a head shop. Ziggy's Head Shop is number 256. And that's where they're located at whatever that is. I need my glasses to find that address on the map. And we've got some ads. Winslow Camera Shop, which is business 349, located on the map at W33. Here's the Aqua Farm Racetrack. Number 369 is at O2. So let's just check that out. Okay, O2 is here, right here. There's the racetrack. All right, so that's how you use the directory and the map. And unlike Sherlock Holmes, let me get this out one more time. Let me just point out that if you, let's say you had a crime committed here on this corner of whatever this street is, Lee Avenue and Roosevelt, let's say business 190. To go there, you'd have to find out the name of that business, but then you just look up, okay, there's business 190. So you look up in the yellow pages, they're sequential. You'd look up 190 and you'd say, okay, that's Sherman's Furs. Now I know the name of the business to look up. And that's how you would look up. You'd look up Sherman's Furs to investigate that building. I'll show you that in a second. That's the directory. We'll come back. We've got the directory. We went over the directory and the city map. Okay, and now we get to the interesting part, the crime scenario book. So, the rules tell you how to use the crime scenario book, and it's pretty involved. Let's dig into it now. Actually, I think maybe I'll delay that a bit. And let me just talk about the Mug Book of Criminals. Where is that mentioned here? Okay. The Mug Book of Criminals tells you about all the potential suspects that there's a file for, on record for. It tells you they've got full frontal profile pictures, physical description, arrest record, aliases, arrest number, other miscellaneous information. Okay, so here we have the mug book of criminals, and you can see there's the credit to Keith Olson. And what we've got here are mug shots of criminals that have been previously arrested. So let's take a look at what we've got here. Here's Candido Garcia, age 28, height 6'1", 170 pounds, eyes brown, hair black, male, Hispanic. There's his aliases, his arrest number, and a little summary arrest record. Second-degree assault, 1 year in state pen. Concealed weapon, 1 year probation. Criminal mischief, 8 months in the city jail. First-degree sexual assault, 7 years in the state. Miscellaneous, he's got a birthmark on his left inside elbow. All right, so we've got mug shots for a whole bunch of people. Did I skip a page here? No. Mug shots for a whole bunch of people with their arrest record. That's half of this book. Again, the inspiration for Gumshoe seems obvious. No fingerprints here, though, but lots of mug shots. And then we've got a little index of all of the criminals by their name, so you could look up someone's name. I don't know if these don't seem to be alphabetical, so I don't know what decides the order of listing. But if you had someone's name, you could look them up here. So it's name and page number. So if you wanted to see if there was an arrest record and a mugshot for someone, you could look them up here. And then the second half of this book, and it's not clear why some are here and some are here, but the second half of this book are just illustrations of people with abbreviated little information on them. So it still has their name, their race, their size, and then what their background is. Bank robbery, organized crime figure, smuggler, terrorist, etc. I believe these all seem to be criminals of some sort, but maybe people without arrest records, that there's just some documented information about, and there's not too many of these. So a couple pages of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. So that's what this book is. Again, this doesn't seem to be in any particular order. It's not alphabetical. And I'm not 100% sure whether this index includes these people. Looks like maximum it goes up to page 22. So I don't think these people here, police laser photos, are in this index. I don't know how you'd find them then if they're not alphabetical. You just have to look hard for them. However, some of the entries will refer you to tell you to look up someone. So we'll see that in a second. So that's the mug book. You might hear about someone and then go look them up, see what they were arrested for, what their aliases are. All right, now we can dig into the heart of the matter, the crime scenario book. Okay, let's take a look at this now. This real piece of work. I mean, are there page numbers here? 89. 89 pages of very small print. All right, Keith Olson, cover art. Photos and sketches by Keith Olson. Okay, so scenario book, there are our 30 scenarios. You can see multiple per page. So each scenario is basically described to you in half a page. And then it's got some extra sections. This is where things get interesting. Conditions, context, alert, crime lab reports, ballistic reports, autopsy reports, and solution and scoring. All right, so a little reminder of the rules. Let's look at the structure of this, then we'll go back to the rules. All right, so each case has a page, half a page or a little bit more. Here's the first case. It's called The Sacred Heart Home for Unwed Mother's Arson. It's got a case number. This case number is number 1-00121. All of the cases in this book start with a number 1. So book 2 would be case 2 dash whatever. But you need to remember this case number. If you decide, okay, today we're going to play case 1. And it suggests you play them in order because they proceed sequentially in time. And one case might refer back to another one a little bit. Okay, it tells you the date of this case, when it starts, when the crime happened. January 3rd at 8:14 p.m. And then it tells you where to start your marker, time marker. And time is a little bit important for this game. So for this case, you would start the marker on 2-1, which is here. The first number here is the day number, and it's broken into quarters. So each 24-hour day is broken into 4 quarters. So first 6 hours of the day, second 6 hours. So basically the way the game describes it is the case happened at 8:41 p.m., which is in the 4th quarter, and so you begin the next day in the morning of the next day. And the way you keep track of this is you can play this solitaire with a group. If you play it with a group, everyone takes their turn. Everyone takes one turn, which is checking a lead, and then that's comprises a 6-hour quarter, and then you move it on. So everyone takes a turn, then you'd move to 2-2. Everyone takes a turn, you move it to 2-3. And so on. When you get to the end, then you go to the 3rd day. And that's it. That's the only way this moves. It's very simple. Now, why does it matter where it is? Well, it matters for a couple of reasons. It matters for sort of scoring. How long did it take you, or whoever won, whoever figured out the crime? How many days did it take you? How many turns did it take you? But it's also important because the game uses a little mechanic where certain information becomes available at certain times. And we'll see that in a second. Okay, getting back to your case. Let's say you were playing case 1. You would read the introduction. It tells you where to start the timer. Okay, here it tells us the nature of the crime. Here's the report. At 8:14 p.m. on the night of the 3rd Metro City Fire Station number 2, gives you the number on the map, the number of the building, was awarded to a fire in the abandoned 6-story Sacred Heart Home for Unwed Mothers located at Waterloo and Harrison. 5 minutes after arriving at the fire, additional equipment was called in. At 8:35 p.m., Fire Chief Fred T. Bates designated the fire a 3-alarm and called in additional men and equipment from Fire Station Number 1, located at Building 216. At 8:50 p.m., Chief Bates ordered his men to fight the fire on an containment-only basis. The fire was finally brought under control at 12:45 p.m. That probably should say 12:45 a.m. if it started at 9 p.m. Fighting the fire was hampered by heavy winds and low temperatures, 10 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, that's our setup for the crime. Here's initial investigation. 2 witnesses reported seeing a man standing in front of the building moments before the fire broke out. See witness statements. Bullet point 2. The Sacred Heart for Unwed Mothers, operated by the Metro City Catholic Archdiocese, had been closed 3 months earlier. Bullet point 3. The property is owned by the Metro City Catholic Archdiocese and was scheduled to be demolished in 2 weeks. The only thing of real value lost in the fire were old records of the Archdiocese stored in the basement of the building. Okay, there's our setup, and it does say see witness statements. Now, here's another mechanic that I was referring to before that most of these entries have. Crime Lab. Analysis of a small tool chest found behind the building will be ready by 3:1. In other words, in the 1st quarter of the 3rd day. So there you have it, where time plays a role, because the players don't get access to that crime report until turn 3:1. So that's a little bit delayed, a nice way to stage information. And there's actually a little subtle twist on that based on your reputation in the game that progresses that we'll get to. But it's a little fiddly, but there's an interesting riff off that and some penalties that could delay your access to things. Okay, that was the crime lab. And then we've got an initial fire department initial report. The building, a 6-story brick structure built in 1928, was abandoned at the time of the fire. Some furniture and box material was still in the building. There's no doubt that the fire is the result of arson. The fire appears to have been started at 3 different locations on 3 different floors of the building. The 4th floor, the 2nd floor, and in the basement. A number of doors had been propped open throughout the building, and furniture that had been saturated with gasoline was heaped in several rooms on the 2nd and 1st floors. At least 5 gasoline cans have been recovered from inside the building. Okay, so, and here are the witness reports that were referred to up here. So witness 1 is Mortimer D. Wallace. Black, male, 78, 5'8", 180 pounds. So all of our witnesses, and whenever someone's mentioned, we get a little information about them. Okay, this witness says, I was walking down to the phone company, building 439, to drop my bill in the night slot when I see the smoke coming out of the 4th floor of the building. About that time, I see this fella, young white fella with a heavy coat and a stocking cap on his head, take a long look at the smoke coming out of the Sacred Heart. And then he takes off, just like that. Looked to me like he had something to do with it. He was a fast runner, I'll tell you that. Witness 2 is Diana Troy. She's a white female, 40 years old, 5'10", 115 pounds. She says, I was stopped at the light at Waterloo and Harrison Street. When the light changed, I pulled out, and this man ran out in front of my car. I know I hit him hard, but he just bounced off and kept going. I yelled and opened the car door and started to get out. That was when I saw the smoke coming out of the building on the next block. By the time my eyes returned to where the man had been, he was gone. I really didn't get a good look at him. He was wearing a navy blue stocking cap and a navy petticoat. He was white or Hispanic, I think. He had dark coloring. I don't know, though. Now that I think about it, he could have even been Oriental. He was running from something. It didn't take long for me to put it together that maybe he had something to do with the fire. Okay, there's case 1. That's the full intro witness statements. The only thing we haven't read here is the police crime lab report of the small tool chest, which isn't available till later. That's case 1 intro. Here's case 2 intro. They all have different case numbers. This is case number 00121. Then we've got 30 cases worth here. They all follow that same basic pattern, but all kinds of different crimes, but some of them give you more information related to the case, some less. All right, so that's the intro to the case. Now let's return to the rule book for a second and see what you do next when you're starting a game. All right. Title of each crime includes the name of the victim, the type of crime, the case number. The crime scenario describes the time it occurred, the time your investigation starts, the location of the crime, brief report of all the known circumstances, outline the information gathered by the initial police, any information about any crime reports and when they're available, an estimate of how soon an autopsy report will be available, an estimate of how soon a ballistics report will be available. So these different reports, crime lab, ballistics, autopsy, they're all found at the back of this book. Remember, the table of contents told us there's a crime lab reports section, a ballistics reports, autopsy reports. There aren't that many. So if we just look at these, starting on page 71, let's just get a look at how much is in here. So here are the crime lab reports. Here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one, here's one. So they're very short, very small. So we got a couple pages of crime lab reports. Then a couple pages of ballistic reports. Again, they're pretty small, but then here's some autopsy reports. This one's half a page. Here's another one, half a page, and that's it. So very brief, only a few cases have them. But total reports here are maybe 6 to 8 pages worth of total reports for the 30 cases. And those become available at certain times during the game, and only certain cases have them. Okay, the bulk of this book are the contact section. This is the meat of the game. So let's return to our table of contents here. So there's the 30 cases in the first 26 pages. Then we've got a conditions list, which is an odd choice of what to do. Then the context section, which is 40 pages. That's the bulk of the game. And then the last 10 pages are these additional reports and solutions, and an alerts section, which I'll talk about in a second. All right, so did it mention the conditions? I'm not sure it tells you here. Somewhere in here it'll talk about the conditions list, which is 27. So for some reason they separated this out. But basically the conditions list is just this list for each case. It tells you what to look for to culminate your investigation. So basically how to solve it. Maybe the idea was, although it doesn't say this in the rules, that you wouldn't, maybe if you want to play on a hard mode, you don't look at this and you don't read the game telling you what it wants from you before you solve it. But in our case, case 1, you can see case 100121 says, arrest the person or persons responsible for the arson of the Sacred Heart Home for Unwed Mothers. So that's our assignment. Okay, that's the conditions. Now, the context section, that's the heart of it. So on your turn, you'll decide who you want to talk to or what building you want to go to. So as you saw before, if you wanted to talk to one of those witnesses, let's say you wanted to get more information from them, you might look them up. Let's go back and remind ourselves. Okay, or we might go to the scene of the crime, the Sacred Hearts. We would find that in the yellow pages or on the map. But let's say we wanted to talk to witness 1, Mortimer D. Wallace. We would look up Wallace Mortimer in our directory. Okay, Wallace Mortimer, he's retired. That's it. We can't find... Well, that's not it. Sorry. If it had a business address for him, we would look that up in the yellow pages and go to that business. But we don't. So we just have his name. That's enough, though. So we would want to go to Mortimer Wallace. So turn 1, player 1, if you're playing solo, you say, okay, I'm going to go and see if Mortimer Wallace has anything to say. Or you could say, I'm going to go to the Sacred Heart. You wouldn't even have to look it up in the yellow pages. You would just say it. And then you would turn to the context section. Now this is where this gets a little awkward and weird. You would turn to the context section. Now don't pay too much attention to this if you're worried about spoilers. Let's read the introduction here. It says, all is the context section. All people and businesses are listed in the context and alerts section of this book in alphabetical order. People are listed last name first. Businesses are listed as they appear in the yellow pages of the directory. That means by name. After each person's name, the following information is given: race, sex, age, height, weight, occupation, place of employment. If a link to message is encountered, you may turn to that business or person mentioned. And then there's rules about alerts, which I'll get to in a second. So we wanted to go to Mortimer Wallace. So we would look him up by his last name, which is W. So we would look up Wallace, and here he is. Mortimer Wallace, black male, 72, 5'8", 180, retired brick factory worker. And then we look after him for our case number, which is 1-00121. If we don't find an entry, then there's nothing for him in the book, and we've lost our turn. If we do find an entry, which in this case we do have an entry for 1-00121, it says, we read it then. And if you're playing multiple players, you would read this privately. He says, don't know what else I could tell you. He was a white boy I seen running away from the Sacred Heart. He sure could run fast. That's it. So, and then if you looked up Sacred Heart, we would look up that name, Sacred Heart. We would look under S. I believe it was called Sacred Heart, not Sacred. I believe that's the start name. So we would look up that business by its name. All right, so I don't see Sacred Heart here. So either there's no entry or I was abbreviating the name and I should have looked it up by its full name. Let's see. What does it say? 6-story Sacred Heart Home for Unwed Mothers. Okay, well, it's not under Sacred Heart, so we would lose our turn if we tried to look it up, but maybe you could go to the Archdiocese and look it up there. But you will look it up by name, and it's all alphabetical. Now, one of the complaints from people, there have only been a handful of people who have ever played this game, but one of the weird things is how much information is leaked here. Like if you go to talk to someone and he's listed under 10 cases, you know, well, this is someone I'm going to meet often over and over again. And all of this information for each entry is so packed in here, it would be very easy to accidentally see something. On the other hand, everyone is listed alphabetically, so in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, if you visit some address and there's no entry there, it's very easy to accidentally see that there's a place right next door that has an entry. Here, you would just see that there's someone else with a similar last name that there's an entry. So probably, although it's easier to see other information, it's probably harder to accidentally see relevant information. Okay. Now, it talked about linked information, linked entries, and that can happen sometimes where, like if you go to a business here, like Wilson's Dairy, and you were playing this case, it just says link to Wilson Adam, the owner. So that's just basically telling you like you would do that, you would continue your turn by doing that. So it's a way of saying like if there's multiple places you could go to talk to the same person, like the business or their look them up by name, you don't lose a turn. It just points you to the other place. All right. So then there are a couple of more subtle details. Let's talk about that. There's a mechanic called alerts. Where is it discussed in the rule book? Alert. Okay. So let's read what this says here. A player must announce out loud if they're calling an alert prior to making a contact, but prior to looking up a person or location. An alert signifies that the player has taken extra precautions, such as calling for a cover unit before attempting to make contact. If an alert is called and the contact is not designated an alert, the player loses one turn. If an alert is not called, but there is an alert entry for that contact, then the book will tell you what to read. It'll have a little sentence. And then that will probably tell you to lose a turn. If you did call an alert and there is an entry, then you get to read some extra text. So let's see if I can put that into words that make more sense. Normally you look up a contact, you just look them up alphabetically. But let's say you've read about you think you found the killer. You're not ready to solve the case, but you want to go talk to them. But they're very dangerous. You could say, okay, guys, before I look up this guy's name, before I try to talk to him, I'm calling the backup and calling an alert. Then you would turn to their entry, just like you would normally, and you would look them up. Now, either they might not even be available at all, but probably you are pretty sure. So they're going to be in there. And you look in there to see if it says there's an alert for them. If there is an alert for them, you'll find them in this special section of alerts, which is here. It's only a couple pages. So these are all people who are sort of dangerous or sensitive to having probably dangerous because you want to call backup. So if you did call an alert prior to looking there, you would read this, you would find them in this alert section and you'd get some extra bonus information, like they're dangerous, but your backup helped you arrest them and catch them and subdue them. So you would probably get a good, nice piece of information there. If you said there was an alert, but you looked them up, if you called backup and you didn't need backup, there was no alert there, then you follow these instructions, which basically tell you lose a turn. So it slows you down. Other people get an extra turn. If you didn't call an alert, but you looked them up and they were dangerous, it might say something like they got away or they beat you up and you lose a turn, or you don't get the information that you would have had if you brought backup with you. It's clever. It's a very clever, cool idea, and it matches the time period that this game was made. Back in the 80s, things were a little bit more loosey-goosey, a little more willing to make people do fiddly stuff. Probably in modern times that would be streamlined. It's so rarely used that maybe it's not worth the trouble, but it's a cool idea. Okay, so that's the alert system, and then the game tells you how to end the game. When someone's ready to end it, if you're playing alone or if you're with a group, it's this section here. If a player wishes to make an arrest, a number of arrests, or execute a search warrant, which is basically you're saying I want to end the game. You can only do it once. They must do so on their turn before making a contact. You can only do this once per scenario. You announce your intention. You say, I'm going to go and arrest John Doe. I'm going to look him up and arrest him, or I'm going to go to a specific location to end the game. You say that, and then you go and you read the solution. You're finishing your game. When you want to make an arrest, you're ending your game if you're playing with multiple people. You go read your solution, and then you announce, was I right or was I wrong? So it says here, after reading the solution, the player must announce who was correctly arrested, who was falsely arrested, and what places were correctly, falsely searched, if applicable. So if the game intro told you your job is to do a search warrant on the place where the gang hideout is, then that's what you would do. You would read your solution, you'd see if you're right. If you're completely right, it says if any criminals remain at large or any places remain to be searched, play continues with the other players. Or maybe you get to keep going too, but you don't get to try to solve it again. Play continues until all other players have made their arrests or search warrants, and then merit-demerit points are awarded based upon the accuracy of the arrest search warrants and when they were executed. So I'm not going to read case one solution, but basically, when you read the solution to a case, it says, if you arrested the right person before day, let's say 4, then you get some merit points. If it took you longer, you're going to lose 5 demerit. You're going to get 5 demerit points penalty. If you arrested the wrong person, you get -20. You get some demerit points. And how do merit points work? Well, it's a little involved, but it's intriguing. So let's look at this page here, moving up in rank. And let's see if we can find this section where it talks about it. Let's see. Beginning the game. To begin the game, each player determines their rank based on previous play, or in the case of a new player, begins the game as a cadet. Once each player's rank is determined and the privileges or disadvantages that accompany their status are noted, play is ready to begin. So you're meant to play through these in sequence, and your rank changes after each scenario as you play. Here's more on this idea of rank. Unlike most games, your rank stays with you in Mugbook. All new players begin as cadets and move up or down in rank as they receive merit-demerit points at the end of each case. Now this gets a little involved. Listen to this. If, when beginning a new game, more than 3 players qualify for the rank of district captain, the player with the least number of merit points shall be demoted to captain. If 2 or more players qualify for the positions of chief inspector, police academy superintendent, or deputy police chief, the player with the most merit points will hold the higher rank. Based on merit points, the other players shall be demoted to either the first unfilled position or to district captain. If there are more than 3 district captains, the player with the least number of merit points shall be demoted to the rank of captain. If a player achieves more merit points than a player holding the rank of district captain or higher, the player with the most merit points shall hold the rank, and the other players shall be demoted. See moving up in rank demerits chart for more details. So, take a look at this. This is like building on this idea of scoring and having a continuing rank that continues. It feels a little fiddly and overkill for a game that's about solving mysteries, but it's interesting to see what they've done here. So you can see you start as a cadet and you can work your way all the way up to deputy police chief. But then some of these positions there can only be one person, so you sort of have to compete for it. And remember, you would get these over the course of many games in this campaign, Loose campaign. And then at the end of each case, it'll tell you whether you gained merit points or lost merit points. When they drop below 0, then you get these penalties. And the penalties are delayed access to reports. It's a kind of a clever idea. So most of it is just for the fun theme of it, and maybe who goes first. But look what happens. After you lose a bunch of demerit points, it says access to crime lab, autopsy, and ballistic reports is delayed by 1 day. So 4-turn delay. Other people are going to see stuff before you. If you got demoted all the way down to private detective, access to all reports is delayed by 2 days. So everyone's going to get an early look at reports. You have to wait 2 days. So if you got 31, you become a shoe salesperson, but you still pursue criminals on the side, it says. I don't remember if there's any other advantages to being here, but it may be that certain cases in the intro say, hey, if you happen to be a lieutenant, you get certain access to certain other information. But a cute system here. Okay, back of the rule book just has a glossary of some terms, BOLO, be on the lookout, etc. All right. What more do we need to look at? I mean, that's basically the game. We're not going to look at any solutions. We've looked at some reports. Remember, they're only a handful. But let's just look at what a solution looks like. First of all, it's in tiny font. You're going to need glasses for this. And here's the solution for case 1, what the answer was. And in fact, let me just block this out for a second. And then here's case 2. So we can block out these 2 cases just so we can look in more detail about the ending score system. So here, whoops, no, that tells you who you should have arrested. All right, I'm not going to read that. It just basically says, depending on how long it took you, if you arrest the right person, you would get certain demerits or certain merit points. And there you have it. That's the game. So each solution is about a half a page, several paragraphs in tiny font that explain the case to you. And then if you just want to look at how big entries are, you can see, in general, a lot of the entries, unlike something like Sherlock Holmes, it feels to me like this is a game that's mostly just the details, really compact. So a good half of these entries are like 1-sentence entries. You talk to someone and they give you their 1-sentence answer related to the case. Whereas in Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, we're much used to occasionally getting a big, long lead where someone has a big discourse, a big dialogue with someone where you're trying to get the writer is trying to give you the flavor of the time and the history of the 1800s and quirky, interesting, fun characters. Here, these are much more about just the facts. You've got much more focus on this was a white male, age 40, height 5'1", and trying to track that person down and getting very brief statements. Everything's really boiled down, compact here. And then an occasional slightly longer entry, but there's no entries here like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective that are a page long and that are really engaging. This is really boiled down, but 30 cases worth of compact stuff here. Now, if you want to watch a game of Mug Book being played, we'll probably play it live on the channel fairly soon. It certainly has captured my interest. It's intriguing. It doesn't have the same appeal to me personally as Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective does, because I'm much more interested in the long dialogues, the historical flavor text, the atmosphere, getting to know certain characters, etc., versus just chasing down super compact lead entries. I guess the one other thing I should mention that something I overlooked here is, in Sherlock Holmes we have informants that you can visit. There is a page in the directory which is similar. Here's Delaney, a detective that the game says in the rules was disappeared, and maybe he's going to come up in one of the cases in this campaign. But he's got a list of some informants. So he's got a guy in different neighborhoods that are informants, talks for money, the rabbit, a burglar. We've got a list of pimps, a list of guns for hire, bookstores, fences, working girls, miscellaneous notes, dealers and their street names, sex offenders. So maybe if you ran into a burglary at a jewelry store, you might come and look, okay, well, we've got a list of a couple fences. Here they're just listed by name, Jordan, Irwin, and Elliot. Maybe you could find them in the mug book and talk to them, see if anyone tried to fence any of the jewelry, etc. So there you have it, Mug Book 1984, super rare out of print game. If you've played this, if you have some experience with this, which probably you haven't because so few people have, I'd love to hear your comments down on this video, on the YouTube video. If you're intrigued by this and want to join us for a playthrough, you might subscribe to the channel, give this a thumbs up. Stop by the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, which you'll find a link to on the About page of this YouTube channel, where we discuss and plan games to play. This is being recorded at the end of April 2023. Probably in the next month or so, we'll try to get in a game of this. You can, if you're particularly interested, if you've got an interest in historical games, you can post on the game queue and say, hey, I'd really like to join for that. Here are the times and days I'm available for it. And we'll try to make sure we schedule this for a time when those people who are particularly interested in these kinds of historical artifacts can join us. And I'll see you on the next video.